I don't like the chairs. Yeah, welcome back to this afternoon session of the Starts Day at the 2021 Festival Ars Electronica in Linz. My name is Lucas Evers. We just had a full morning that lasted long after midday with a lot of projects about data uses for artistic practices and data visualization. Also with a lot of climate-related concerns. I thought it was a very rich session, but also this afternoon session will be a very rich one, mainly talking about manufacturing and the future of manufacturing in all sorts of contexts. We're first going to talk with these artists here next to me that are part of the second winning team of the Starts Prize with the project called Remix al Barrio. Marion, Reale and Anastasia Pistofidou, yeah. It's a tongue twister. And thereafter there will be more panels, but I also want to inform you about what further is happening. So after the interview I will do with the two of you, there will be also parallel sessions that I think, yes, you can still decide on going to. It's a parallel session on the Better Factory project that will be about the intersection between art and industry, which is moderated by Rodolfo Groenewoud van Vliet, and Ali Mohammed, who is the coordinator of Better Factory. But there's also a workshop from Voyext, the consortium that is also about robotics, hosted by my colleague of De Waag in Amsterdam, called Robots Are People Too, helping robots by humans to become more perfect. Should he become that? That is the question. After the interview I'm going to do with the Remix al Barrio team, they will come back on stage together with a number of other speakers, which among others is Michela Magas of the Industry Commons Foundation and Areti Markopoulou. But both will be introduced when we start that panel. So I think, first of all, I want to introduce Marion and Anastasia and the project Remix al Barrio. It's a project that is made by a much larger team, if I'm correct, that comes from the IAC and FabLab Barcelona ecosystem of innovation, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's about looking at food waste as a material stream to produce new goods. Yeah? Anastasia is a digital fabrication expert, wearables and e-textiles practitioner, biomaterial maker and researcher, and an educator. She's part of FabLab Barcelona and the EAC team since 2011 as tutor, advanced manufacturing office manager, coordinator and researcher, and she's currently leading the materials and textiles strategy area. From that perspective, you're also working with the Fab Academy. You're one of the initiators, together with my colleague Cecilia Raspanti, who is not here. But as you may know, Fab Academy is, like Fab Academy, a global course to learn how to make new textiles and fabrics, using, amongst others, digital fabrication methods. I think you can give that much more color if we go into a conversation. Marion Reale is a systemic design researcher exploring co-creation processes in the territorial transformations towards circular economies and a cosmopolitan localism. You need to say a bit more about that in the conversation, because I think that is very interesting and very important. She's currently working at FabLab Barcelona and EAC, where she has coordinated the 10 pilots of the Syscode project, including Remix El Barrio, and she is also associate researcher at Estia, chair.
Bali,
yeah. Estia, chair, Bali, and Center for Circular Design. Yeah, and we also know each other from a number of other projects that I think we can discuss here that she makes, looking at diversity and in fashion creation, and the Reflow project, looking at circular material streams in cities. Yeah, if I'm not wrong, we will see some images in the background of the Remix El Barrio project that in the next panel you will also give a presentation about. So Remix El Barrio is looking at food waste or rest streams of food in cities in order to create new materials. Can you say something about these materials? Because there's an online audience that is not able to go and see the work in the building next to us, where the Stars Prize winners are presented.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. We are honored to be here and have this conversation with you. Long time that we wanted to meet each other, I guess.
Yeah.
Remix El Barrio is the outcome of the pilot project of Syscode, locally in Barcelona, concretely in the Poblenou area, the arroba 22 area of Barcelona, where also the municipality of Barcelona has put a lot of effort into the digital transformation of the district. And it looks into creating a circular local ecosystem, documented in an open source way so that it can be replicable into other cities or villages or localities. Creating new materials, generating new markets, reinventing or inventing processes, combining arts, aesthetics, the crafts, and the digital manufacturing. These materials derive from different food waste stream, and it is a little bit re-questioning the negative annotation of the word garbage. Why should we think of garbage as something bad? So with this project, we also want to reconsider and understand that there should be no garbage. Nature doesn't have any waste. So we should understand that the resources can be done in a circular way, enter back in a loop of production. The materials that were generated in the Remix El Barrio are bio-based materials, which means that they are made from biopolymers, bio-based polymers, and when we say bio-based polymers, we mean starches, we mean algae, we mean gelatin biodegradable polymers combined with different plasticizers which give the elasticity, so you can play with the recipe and you can have a very hard plastic that is machinable, and you can make a desk, or you can have a leather, bio leather, or a fruit leather, how we call it. And they were sourced by different providers, services, or the stakeholders, the ecosystem of Remix in the district, restaurants, urban gardens, and neighborhood associations.
Yeah, I'm looking at garments that are made of that starches combined with, what is it, cellulose?
This is agar, and it is combined with coffee, orange peel, yerba mate, and carrot peels. On the left, you can see the bio-pantone. It is pantone, but made from natural dyes. So this, specifically this project is a project that is just before the Remix El Barrio incubation. It is the research done in the Fab Textiles and Material Lab within the Fab Lab Barcelona, and it has served as the knowledge in order to do the transfer knowledge to the designers, to the 12 designers that they got incubated in the project.
Yeah, yeah. I also see a lot of stuff that is also appearing in other design areas. We know the works of Susan Lee that is making these types of garments. But you're also looking at, and that's maybe a little more a question for you, Marion, you're looking at making it systemic, trying to document all the processes well, trying to understand the design research that's behind it in order to make it open for others to do the same. Can you say something about that?
Yes, of course. All the project is around also the theme of co-creation. And when we look at the results of the Syscode project, we can look that co-creation can be understood by many prisms and representation. And it's really nice to see in the Remix El Barrio that the co-creation pilot based on material making from food waste can really involve a strong diversity of stakeholders, but also a different layer in terms of future policy that need to be addressed not only in the organizational level or changing like some individual change, but also can be built and co-design with the policymaker at the city level, also trying to join the different policy addressed by the European Union. What is nice also when you look at the journey of the designer is that this systemic approach to think about system is really, coming all the time. When you start the analysis of the context, when you meet people, you try really to map all the ecosystem to have a vision of what is happening, and you build a bit the knowledge and the information with the different testimony or interaction that you have with them. And I think the first phase of the project was really interesting because it was this exploration. We went to see some restaurants, some bars, coffee, and we interact directly with the owners, and also see the constraints in a way. And in that sense, at this moment, appeared many systemic issue that we can think of when we talk about circular system, like the circular logistic for doing this kind of local economy, how we can optimize the collection, how we can sort better inside the kitchen of a restaurant, for instance, and after, where will be the place of production. So when we start, we already a bit model, map, and realize the complexity of all this this system. And we can, at this moment, choose also where we can make some intervention. And at this moment, it was really nice to have this knowledge, emerging knowledge about biomaterials, because there was a real need from reskilling, or at least be creative about the waste that this type of waste, and by sharing knowledge, like we talk a lot about cross-pollination with Anastasia, sorry, and it is really this that happened during the process. It was really, of course, a lot of transmission of knowledge, but also a lot of learning from each other, and we learn a lot from, for instance, the guy at the urban garden had a really strong knowledge about some specific process. When with the designer, it was systematic interaction, and it was really nice to go through this process with them. And well, just talking a bit, I think you see the many dimensions that come with this biomaterial making. And of course, maybe I can finish with this. When we talk about systemic and sustainability, we talk about the impact that we generate while we are making. And it was also like quite an adventure to find how to integrate the eco-design principle, the regenerative principle, inside the recipe that you can see, and also all the services, the system that you create from the project.
Yeah, super. I guess I can imagine that you quickly go to a type of material that you already have some knowledge about. But I would be interested whether you, for instance, also did a type of mapping to see what other types of raw materials, crude materials, for your type of research are available. You can think about orange peels and coffee, etc. But did you do anything to maybe look at the type of biological rest streams that come from managing parks or anything? Did you do that type?
So we work very specifically, and I think also this is the reason why the project is very real, and it has a real impact. We did, of course, try to select materials in the hardiness zone of Spain, like olive pits and orange peels, eggshells, tortilla, you know. Mm-hmm. So these are on purpose, but this also opened the question that this exact project is completely different in another hardiness level zone. If you do this project in Brazil or if you do it in Australia, you will be using different kind of organic waste. Of course, when you work within the Fab Lab, you have some limitations in the quantities and the time that you have to process these materials. Because if we look into the process is the collection, then you need to dry them. Maybe sometimes you also need to disinfect them by boiling them with soda. And then you need to shred them, to trim them, to sift them, to obtain the granulometry you want, and then you start to add them as the ingredient for the biopolymer, with the biopolymer and the plasticizer, so the filler. And of course, we also tried sometimes in some recipes to eliminate completely the filler and use only like pure the raw material by pressing it with heat. Mm-hmm. So in the case of the coffee grounds, after some specific temperature, when you heat press them, the cellulose itself creates bonds, and you don't need any other binder. In this case, we look into trying to measure it was a different kind of mapping that we did, because we wanted to make a linear connection that 37 eggshells, which is a tortilla for 12 people, makes 3 coffee cups. So this is kind of a language that we need to talk with the common people, that they understand. If we put, we used all the banners and the posters and the graphic material of the project was made out of waste as well.
Yeah.
So we made the graphics with the laser engraving and the paper out of the coffee peels. And in this kind we also put this in the coffee place where we were taking the coffee grounds. And we wanted to talk with the people of the district, with the family that will see this and understand, okay, what can I do with that? So the language is important, and this is why this project has a bigger impact. Even though the research has started a long time ago, it wouldn't be so important if it had stayed within the university, within the research institute. So we need to take out the research out in the street, and we need to put the people to confront and respond to it and make it easy for them to understand.
Yeah, so there's quite a public engagement part of the project involved. Mm-hmm. Do you also encourage people then to use your recipes to do it at home?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And this is one, if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So yeah. This is in the hard-coded in our open source mentality, that the documentation is half of the job. It wouldn't make any sense to make this project if we didn't have the open source tutorials and the handbooks and the cookbooks that allow people to replicate the information. And in this sense, we also talk in a language that is very accessible to the public by publishing recipes. Everybody knows how to cook. And also understanding that the concept of the recipe is so broad, because at the same time that it is so specific, it can be so abstract. You can always put your creativity while you're cooking. So that's the nice part of the recipe.
Yeah, true. Of course, I also see that in the textile lab upstairs at Waag. It's indeed the kitchen there. It's cooking, yeah.
The new office of the designer is the kitchen.
Yeah. Sure, that also counts for a number of other types of material production that have more to do with biotechnology. I want to encourage, and I don't know whether there are any online questions, I also want to encourage anyone in the audience to come up with questions if you have them, because this is, it's a public afternoon, and it shouldn't be only me asking questions. Yeah. Marion, can you say something more about how you take away this as a design research, and how, for instance, also, and that may be a little bit of a different question, how entrepreneurs in your neighborhood react to giving you their waste materials? Are they easy to interest? Are they eager to give the material? Are they quickly coming back asking you, like, you came to get coffee waste last week, but can you come every week?
Okay. So I will maybe answer the first part of the question, reacting about this design approach, and maybe also pinpointing a bit on the first question that you mentioned to Anastasia about this mapping and how we can really provide knowledge about resources that are produced locally and are present locally, and it's really important maybe to think of circular design and systemic design, regenerative design as really a way to look and to look at the district or the city level and to identify and to look at what the territory, which is the resource of the territory, mapping it, and just to complete, it's true that there is other project where we are working on with the Fab Lab, with the Fab City Foundation also, and of course with many partners associated, included VAG, where we try to provide some tools to support each stakeholder to act. So it could be from the policy side, it could be from the entrepreneurial side, it could be from the civil society. And at this moment, when you look at what are the needs of each of the stakeholder to make this transformation happen, first, of course, it's true that they need to align on this kind of mapping and strategy at more higher level. But what feeds really the transformation is, as we were mentioning, it's really to test, to experiment what we really believe worth on that. So I think there is two sides. It's not everyone is convinced and wants to do this kind of project, and this is also why we claim that such manifesto with the Remix Collective, because we really believe in it. But there is another wheel at next to us that really are not going at the same speed, and we really need. Of course, when we went in the district, not everyone is like, oh, it's super. There is like a lot of curiosity and creativity, of course, but there is also the reality of the efficiency that there is with the actual economic system. And for instance, there is many restaurants who are not able now to maybe sort different waste and to find this logistic that I mentioned before. It's really like a disruptive practice, and the restaurant we work with was really like a pioneer in that. And what we want to show is that if we want, it's really possible to do it, and we can organize and really find simple solution to make this happen. Because we talk about a small scale. Because when we go to the restaurant of the district, we just have to take a bike or just walking, and we can have really low-tech system of logistics to do that for sure. And after, if I understood well the question, I think there is also this dimension of how maybe we can think about future consumer of the prototype product that we see and we have co-produced in the Remix Collective. And this was also a super interesting point when we were doing the first co-creation session, because it was about what is worth being produced for the district, what kind of product, what kind of tools we can make from waste, because thinking about the diversity of process and thinking that we can do maybe almost anything, what we would like to do as a collective or as, so you can look at, once again, the urban garden, the inside of the restaurant, and you can say, well, I can produce this for this public. And this creates really direct interaction and direct needs, and I think it's really, by testing and attracting by value, by discourse, and by practicing that we can really going to the transformation level.
Yeah, and so are you also bringing certain products back into the restaurant? So the results are shown in the restaurant, like lighting or, interesting. And I know that it's coming from many sides, because I know a lot of similar, yet not so rigorous initiatives like yours now. But I also know that there is, for instance, the Agricultural University of Wageningen in the Netherlands is doing the same with mycelium and other sorts of materials that are derived from waste materials. Is there anyone from the industry looking over your shoulders? Are they interested in the way you are approaching this on this very, what was it? The cosmopolitan localism kind of approach, because you also made a design choice to be very local in this.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, the designers, Remix El Barrio created tons of opportunities for the participants, us and the designers and the ecosystem in general. And when we say the outcomes, they are not only products, they are also services for design. There are also workshops for transfer knowledge. And we had, for example, Knife Factory that is working with olive pits. There were, when the project was published in the news, there were many companies that started contacting them and us, saying we have this industry that is producing waste of almonds. Could you produce some solutions? We also had some contacts of industries that they are already producing products from waste. And normally this kind of waste that it is coming from the shells is used for biofuel. But this is downcycling. What we are doing is upcycling. The only reason for the existence of this project is because of the design, because of the upcycling, because otherwise you could also compost all of this waste. And we are now incubating with a new project which is called Food Shift. We are incubating 2 of the projects of Remix El Barrio in the business side of it, so they can also create their business model, and they can see and collaborate with other companies so that they can. And they are providing, the designers, they are providing services to companies. They are creating small series collections that they are numbered. Of course, if you see, we are talking about new markets that are combined with new processes, and this, if you're reinventing completely new tools and processes, maybe it's more difficult to implement it very directly in an industrial level, because you need to set up a whole new industry. But if you can do a bioplastic that can be used in the normal stream of petroleum-based plastics, you don't need to have the infrastructure. You don't need to redo the infrastructure. Which means that there are a lot of industries that they are demanding now to go towards greener sustainable solutions, looking also into the Green Deal, of course. And they themselves, it's not only the consumer, it's the industry also that they want that. So we have many examples of small, medium enterprises, and also opportunity networks like funds from the European Union, like COSME funds, that they support these activities. Also the global change award of H&M. So we have the mycelium leather, we have the Mycoworks, we have the cactus leather, that we have the orange peel fiber, that was, like all the companies, they are looking into it. So it's real, it's happening. The thing is that when you, the problem, and I will finish very soon,
That's all right.
The problem is that when you want to go from the TRL technology level 5 or 6 to go a further step and really make a business, you need to be engaged, you need to be ready. The startup ecosystem sometimes is giving a mentality that, okay, I will have an idea and then I will sell it to Google or Microsoft or a big company, which is not the mentality that we want. We want the people to marry with their ideas and get a life going on, as our fathers did, for example, to get continuity, not to live their great ideas. And this is sometimes problematic. And that's why also I think there are all of these financial aids and helps so that people really get to stay with their ideas.
Yeah. I think that's not easy to go that way, but I think, therefore, this award is supporting those types of attitudes that you are making with it. You also collaborate in the Reflow project, but not as a pilot yet. This would be one of the most advanced pilots in the Reflow project, I could say so. There's another Reflow for the people in the audience is a similar project where we have 6 pilots about textiles, about energy circularity, about food waste circularity, and about building materials circularity. IAC is part of the research team of the project, but doesn't run a pilot, yet this one would fit very good. Yeah. I hope we did a very interesting conversation here, because I didn't get any questions from the audience. I understand your colleague co-designers are here.
Yes.
Are they in the audience here?
Some of them are here. You can come.
Could you quickly come to the stage, and then we give you a hand as a conclusion of this conversation and go to the next panel.
Yes, of course. The prizes for innovative collaboration. There are many people.
Please, come on.
Yes.
We're a small audience here, but it's great to have that entire team here.
Okay.
So thank you. I'll say to the camera, thank you for being here. Thank you for our online audience. Thank you for the audience here in this rather intimate space. We'll be back at the next panel that will also be together with Remix El Barrio, but also with 2 other speakers, that is Areti Markopoulou and Michela Magas. And we will start at 4 o'clock sharp. So see you back then. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
And thank you, Remix El Barrio.
Mi nombre es Vincenzo Ortiz, participé en el proceso de co-creación facilitado por el Fab Lab de Barcelona, aquí en el barrio de Poblenou, y formo parte de Remix El Barrio. Remix El Barrio es un colectivo de diseñadores de biomateriales hechos con restos alimenticios. Estamos explorando nuevas técnicas de ecodiseño colaborativo que involucra redes locales, fomentando prácticas circulares de residuo cero. Estamos transformando los restos de comida en nuevos materiales, productos y servicios, haciendo papel y envases a partir de residuos de cáscara de café, creando lámparas, sillas y macetas originales a partir de huesos de aceituna, cáscara de huevo, mate, diseñando una chaqueta hecha con pieles de naranja, creando tintes naturales a partir de huesos de aguacate, jabones a partir de aceite usado, galletas y snacks para vecinos o animales a partir de las mermas de restaurantes. La ecocreación es un eje fundamental del colectivo Remix El Barrio. Hoy ya no pensamos en la idea de un autor, sino en el intercambio de prácticas y divulgación de conocimientos mediante las expertas del Fab Lab. Estamos unidos en torno a los valores de la cooperación local, la solidaridad, las nuevas formas de artesanía y la circularidad, aquí en Barcelona.
What if in the following years food waste will become our new treasure? Inspired by Remix El Barrio, from Fab Lab Barcelona and IAAC Poblenou, Barcelona's neighborhood has shaped a circular ecosystem with restaurants, citizens and new fabrication community places. How does it work? It is simple, the circular system, starting from collecting waste from restaurant, transported via cargo bike, pre-processing waste, designing, crafting and micro-manufacturing of products, redistributing them in local marketplaces, urban gardens, or even directly to restaurants. In 2030, this practice has inspired many other places. Each neighborhood functions as a point of transformation of waste into biomaterials, as a place of meeting and cooperation between designers and artisans building knowledge and products, recipes, knowledge and practices are shared in the other barrios of Barcelona, other cities and places in the world. Become a food waste material maker. Learn by making. Think about proximity and local consumption. Care, craft the future, now.
Welcome back. Welcome back to this second part of the afternoon of the Starts Day here in Linz at the 21 Ars Electronica Festival. I'm happy to be back here with a number of great speakers. We're going to talk about Fabrication Deep Dive. And it's a panel with a number of participants, Michela Magas, who you see there, who I will introduce soon, Areti Markopoulou, and the two lead design researchers, Marion, Reale, and Anastasia, Pistofidou. So what we're going to talk about is about the merger of the Fab Lab infrastructure that you see emerging, how this becomes very grown up, and it's not only about trying to do something with a 3D printer, but it's currently a carrier and a pusher, those labs, of real material transformations in design processes. So rethinking and restructuring production cycles is becoming more and more urgent, and artists, architects, designers, engineers are at the forefront of developing prototypes and processes that have the potential to make manufacturing across various fields more sustainable, equitable, and empathic towards both humans and the environment. That last part is very important, I think. From ethical design principles to revolutionary techniques building to material innovation in production design, in product design, this keynote and roundtable discussion brings together revolutionary, I might say, perspectives from architecture, robotics, and digital fabrication. So first, I want to introduce our first keynote speaker that we were lucky to get for this, who is Michela Magas. Actually, Michela was part of one of the first STARTS initiatives before it was called STARTS even, which was called ICT in Art Connect. That project resulted in the European Commission being confident that this is a very important way to go to create the combination of complementary research between art and artists, that of technologists, and that of science. Michela is the initiator of Industry Commons, and she bridges research and industry with a track record of 25 years of innovations. She's chair of the Industry Commons Foundation, I said that already, innovation advisor to the European Commission and the G7 leaders, member of President von der Leyen's high-level roundtable for the new European Bauhaus, and member of the advisory board of CERN. It's impressive. She created the Industry Commons concepts in 2015, whilst co-chairing the Innovation Ecosystems Workgroup for the Alliance of Internet of Things Innovation. So AIOTI. In 2017, she was awarded European Woman Innovator of the Year, and 2016, she was presented with an Innovation Luminary Award for Creative Innovation by the European Commission and Intel Labs Europe. We can go on, there's much more, but I think everybody's craving for the story you have to tell, because that is interesting, specifically on the topic of manufacturing and the new evolution that is undergoing. So please give her a warm applause as welcome, Michela Magas.
Thank you, Lucas, for this really generous introduction, and you will get a degree in European Commission acronyms for this.
They're tongue twisters.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're laughing. I think you need a degree in this, don't you? I'm so pleased that you mentioned our work together at the beginning of Starts, because I actually will mention that in a minute. I will share my screen first. So let me see if we can see my slides. Just bear with me 1 second. So hopefully you can see my slides now.
Yep.
So I've actually used the title, "The Lab as a Docking Point for Industry," and you might wonder where that comes from. And it actually comes from President von der Leyen's opinion piece that she wrote at the launch of the new European Bauhaus. So I thought that might be very interesting, that the sort of language that is now part of the top-level policy making, which may actually be familiar to some of us, and I think it's very interesting language. And when she launched it at the inaugural speech or the State of the Union speech on the 16th of September 2020, she presented a methodology of co-creation, which I think is very familiar to some of us here. And so it is remarkable because it puts culture at the center of policy making and this really grand ambition for the very first time. But there's another thing that's really remarkable about it, and that is, if you actually knew the European Constitution, you would know that culture is the domain of individual member states. So there isn't really a mechanism to place culture at top level as it has been done. And so this is actually a really bold move on many accounts. And I think it's worth understanding that part. Right from the beginning, I mean, I'm just summarizing, for a few of you are familiar with the European Bauhaus, but I'm summarizing a few essential elements of it. So for those of you who are perhaps not so familiar, this is just a few of the official partners. There are 270. Ars Electronica was one of the first. They were chosen from over 700 applicants, but the partners actually have a very, very big commitment that they have to fulfill. So it's not a simple thing to become a partner. And there's a great deal of work attached to it, which is why there are 270, which is a lot already. And they come from all kinds of backgrounds, and we have even sort of nanotechnology, and we have all kinds of unions for sustainable living, for instance, and not just creative industries and architects, and as well as, of course, accessibility organizations, as you can see here. And so I'm honored to be part of the high-level roundtable with some amazing and inspiring people who come from all kinds of backgrounds. And I could highlight many things here, but perhaps I should mention Sheila Patel, who is a phenomenal woman who's working with women's collectives in India. And she's constantly pulling us back from being Eurocentric. And this has been hugely appreciated in our discussions as high-level roundtable. And this is just an example of sort of some of the methodologies we've introduced, working methodologies, which are unusual again in policy making. And this one, for instance, shows you how we map our values. As a high-level roundtable, we decided to map our values first before we make any decisions. And what we identified is a very, very strong line of justice, social justice more than anything. And inclusion and social justice seem to be very much the driving force of our thinking. And then, of course, there's a line of respect for the environment, respect for our both our built and our natural environment. A huge amount of suggestions have been sent to the New European Bauhaus, so these are just a few of them, but there are thousands literally. So amazing projects out there. They've all been collated, they've all been read and digested. So basically the work that has been done has been both in terms of consulting the partners, consulting the high-level roundtable and mapping out our views and our values, but also in collecting all of this intelligence from the ground. And so as a high-level roundtable, we've ended up with a concept paper, which you can actually access online. It's rather long, but it contains things like the life cycle, introducing the life cycle into our thinking, promoting a new circular tectonics, for example, which I think is very, very relevant for industry. We had a huge conference, 8,000 participants, so just to give you an idea of just how many people are really interested in engaging actively with this. And if you look at some of the brainstorming, the terms used in brainstorming, of course, they will be extremely familiar. So again, this idea of a lab, the idea of prototyping, the idea of making, all of these are actually at the foundation of creating this movement. And again, the idea that we are really, really strongly advocating for is feeding grassroots experimentation directly into high-level policy. So this is also part of our paper. And this is on Monday, actually, a meeting with the President and Commissioners Gabriel and Ferreira, and very, very active in this engaged, and this conversation is very much ongoing. So I'm winding back here to the moment that Lucas has mentioned, which is when we were working on the precursor of START, or rather the project that actually gave birth to the START initiative. And of course, it shows you very, very clearly how experimentation can set up, can highlight concerns and sort of future paradigms, or what is a paradigm for us at that moment. For instance, in this case, data ethics, which we were all working on at the time, was not really high on the agenda in policy at the time. And so this is a classic example of we are all aware of how this works. It takes a long time for the actual conditions out in industry to be aligned in a way that then highlights that a paradigm shift is needed in this direction. So in the past, we were counting on sort of waiting for 10 years, 10 years between experimentation in the arts to when things are deployed. But things have sort of rather sped up. So back from around that time, experimental labs, this is us running with the London Symphony Orchestra and the Barbican. So the labs that came out, this is our third year that we were doing labs. And so basically maker mentality, fab lab mentality combined with the digital and with creativity and with science, etc. I mean, you are all familiar with this. But the experimental lab was also then part of the language that was used by President von der Leyen in her opinion piece at the launch of the New European Bauhaus. So it is actually interesting how this language is now being used at high level. And this is an example of the project that one of the projects came out of that as an evolution. So parallel to the STARTS program that was launched, we were doing test beds, but we were looking at methodologies to enable communities of makers and labs. Again, these kinds of things were fed directly to the innovation recommendations for the Horizon program at the time. So we were already paving the way for translating prototyping and experimentation into policy. Another example of where the paradigm shift is happening, and is certainly coming from the creative sector, I would say, is in reframing the notion of ability. And again, it's from the idea of prototyping, making, and creating new conditions in the digital. And these are a couple of really successful projects that have come out of our community, but basically there are many examples out there. And it is definitely reframing the idea of the future of work, what it means to be able, and who is the able-bodied in this new context. This is, again, another thing that will be very familiar to the Ars Electronica community, of course, working with frontier frontier technologies and creating completely new formats, and then testing how those affect human beings. And there's a huge amount of works that we could quote there. This is one of our labs. So basically, this is data bots in one of our labs. And I believe they were also part of Ars Electronica. And this is some of the latest ones. This is last year during the pandemic, running a lab in situ in this one of the largest wetlands in Europe, considering our interaction with broader ecosystems and dealing with the idea of artificial life that was built on top of these ecosystems. And we are about to run our 20th one of those in Aveiro, again, and with satellites all around the world that participate. Again, another concern that you will now see reflected in what's happening, and I'm about to show you some of those, but also how we scaled this idea, this ecosystem approach. The idea, this is a sketch to show the idea that the verticals are rather blending to some extent, and there is a culture that's dissecting across this blend, and where cultures connect and merge, there are new values emerging. And this is rather abstract, but it actually turned into something very, very concrete for us, which is the industry commons. And now we're working on industry commons with a huge amount of industry partners. It's very much gathered momentum, set of horizontal enablers that allow us to interoperate between different domains, so knowledge domains, industrial domains, and creating very much a space of common understanding. So industry commons is very much a space of common understanding. And our first enabling framework is an ontology ecosystem, and this is what we're currently building. And it's going into all kinds of other enabling systems, so it's very much now part of the Horizon program. It's actually an official track in the Horizon program, this idea and this concept. So this brings me to this junction between culture, creativity, and industry. And these are two statements that were made just before the pandemic. And they look like a dichotomy. They look like they're two completely disparate things. But actually, we've already seen, how they influence each other. And I would like to run you through just a few examples of that now, because you can see the direct impact that is being now had at high level, obviously, through the culture being central to the new European Bauhaus initiative. So this is, for example, our reaction from the arts to the Industry 4.0 paradigm of automation, and so us attempting to bring the human-centric perspective into it. This is us at the AI Impact Lab in Örebro. Now, that's an example of sort of where we are trying to shift the paradigm. And interestingly, Industry 4.0 automation has now shifted to the Industry 5.0 human-centric paradigm. So already in the current framework program, it has moved to human-centric. But actually, because we are now engaged with the new European Bauhaus, so we are able to feed policy very much with, with the sort of next paradigm that is really very much something that's central currently to the arts, is the idea of shifting to the more than human ecosystemic approach, and that's already, in our concept paper. So, I would challenge industry to shift to 6.0 in a few years, 3-4 years. I give them to do that. And the idea of inclusion, massive, in the labs and its prototyping environments. All kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of ages, and of course, huge amount of female participation in something that is traditionally considered very technical. And in industry, you don't get the sort of gender split that you get in the labs. In this case, for instance, we had 53% female participation with over 800 people hands-on prototyping. And the other three were 3 different gender categories, so you also have to account for that. So it wasn't just 2 categories, it's 53% female in 4 categories. And so when we look at Industry 5.0, now inclusion is very much part of that, and it wishes to include several categories of people. This is how this is worded. And what we are looking at in the European Bauhaus is actually, again, a paradigm shift where what you do is you don't have people in categories. What you focus on is radical inclusion which is basically on where we converge. And so it's a different starting point. It's a different way to think about this. And this is, of course, something that industry can also be thinking about. Another example of where we really kind of push forward with new systems for governance, peer-to-peer, which are all very, very familiar, again, to the Ars Electronica community, but also, you know, we were here tracking IP creation in real time in the blockchain back in 2017. So this is an experiment we did. We did a lot of work on how we can create systems for attribution in this fabrication space. And it really, really works. And this is interesting because, of course, I have actually been able to do a proposal for the European Innovation Council to do something like this, and I'm on the expert advisory group for that now. We are actually working on something similar now, which is actually quite sort of at a high level. And then when you look at how Industry 5.0 considers technology is really kind of equated with digitalization. Whereas in the new European Bauhaus, we're pushing for technology to be both frontier and vernacular. So basically, you know, crafts and skills that are also technology. And this is also another very important sort of point of differentiation. And we've always framed everything we did in labs by moonshots. This is Imogen Heap sending her voice to the moon via the Dwingaloo radio telescope in the north of Holland, just because we could bounce it off of there and she could hear her voice back, and it was an experience. It was definitely an experience. It was 83 people who did that from all sort of like some like 32 countries, all the participants in the high-level lab. And of course, it shifts your mind into a different place as to sort of why we're doing it, what we're doing it for. I think that's pretty clear. It's not about it being massively innovative as a piece of technology. It's actually about where you're positioning yourself. And so when we look at Industry 5.0, it wants to upskill by training. So upskilling is obviously very important to keep the jobs. For the new European Bauhaus, we advocate for the future of work to be driven by missions. And so that's, again, it's a different approach. It's a completely different way to do this. And of course, for this, we need agile, lower risk public systems, for instance, of funding or in ways that where we can allow the grassroots communities to actually prototype at a grand scale without barriers. And so finally, big contribution, I think, to policy is our idea of creating a space for common understanding. And I think this is what the arts do phenomenally well. And this is something that is now a methodology as part of the new European Bauhaus, hugely, hugely important about engaging communities and actually being able to precipitate behavioral change. So that's all for now from me. So hopefully we can sort of see how things have translated into policy, or how they are translated into policy much faster, thanks to culture being at the center.
Thank you, Michela. That spans a lot. That's impressive what you do there in the new European Bauhaus and how your voice is in there, I think. It's also interesting to see how your presentation is a real mix of artistic experimentation and these comparisons you make between the ideas that you formulate within the NAP and that are how it relates to that in Industry 5.0. We'll go into a discussion after all the presentations, unless there is a very urgent question from the audience. I have one. Do you also talk to the people of the Industry 5.0 teams, let's say?
Oh, absolutely. We are on, this, for instance, the ontology ecosystem is something that we are physically building. It's not just a prototype, it's actually being built, and it's a huge consortia, and it's actually international consortia. So it's gathered so much momentum. This idea of industry commons, creating an industry commons, has gathered so much momentum. We got Japan, Korea, China, Brazil, and also advisors from the US, and sort of, high-level people in high-level positions who want to be engaged with this. So it's actually more of a global initiative. And yeah, industry is, I was actually surprised as to just how much industry has jumped on board, but I think the space has matured for this. And this is what when I say it takes a while for spaces to mature to the level where we understand the next paradigm shift, but this is definitely now ready.
Yeah, let's talk about that further after the two following presentations that are also talking about this ecosystem or representing this ecosystem, yet also much from a grassroots perspective. I have also introduced them before in the panel we just had, but I'm going to do them again. Marion Reale is a systemic design researcher exploring co-creation processes in the territorial transformations towards circular economies and cosmopolitan localism. She's currently working at FabLab Barcelona and IAC, where she has coordinated the 10 pilots of the Syscode project, including the award-winning Remix El Barrio, which is actually the reason why we are now here. She's also an associate researcher at Estia, Chair Bali, and the Center of Circular Design. And she's together here with her colleague, Anastasia Pistofidou, who is a digital fabrication expert, wearables and textiles practitioner, biomaterial maker, and educator. Part of FabLab Barcelona and the IAC team since 2011, and a tutor, advanced manufacturer, office manager, coordinator, and researcher. She's currently leading the materials and textiles strategy area at FabLab and Barcelona and IAC. In 2013, she co-founded Fab Textiles, and in 2017, she co-founded Fabricademy, which she does with her colleague at Waag, Cecilia Raspanti. And the Fabricademy is a new textiles academy where they specifically also train and encourage people to do experiments that fit in this ecosystem, I would say. Fabricademy is a globally distributed program that explores the implications and applications of new technologies at the intersection of textiles, digital fabrication, and biology, nature-based solutions, I would say. She also works as a content curator for the FAB Foundation. So you're going to once again present that great work, Remix El Barrio, and thereafter we'll have another presentation of Areti Markopoulou, who I will introduce then. So please give the team of Remix El Barrio again a warm applause.
Thank you, Lucas. This time, in this presentation, we will present more our personal trajectory, the body of work that we have been developing through the years. First, I would like, let's get back in place and all together think about what is this panel about. We are talking about the future of sustainable manufacturing. And I would like that we can also try to do a common exercise to take some post-its if you have at home and think what would be one word that you would say about the future of sustainable manufacturing. I would say that my first word is creativity. And with this, I would like to introduce my presentation. Something that may sound a little bit naive or romantic, but it's a little short video with a little poem about the future of sustainable manufacturing, if you want to say that. So we can have the presentation. No, it needs to go back. Sorry. Yeah. So here we are. It's yeah.
Is there sound to it?
Yes.
Can we get sound to the video? I suggest you turn a little bit.
Okay, maybe
Yeah.
I will go there then to see
Yeah,
a little
that
bit
is,
better.
that is a good solution. Your
Drop on?
microphone? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. So this was a project that I did in collaboration with a fashion designer, very young fashion designer within COSME fund, very little help, financial help for small, medium enterprises called Worth Project. Yeah, so.
Yeah,
Yes.
there he goes.
So,
It's slow, so
yes.
yeah.
So, I think creativity is the first and most important part when we want to establish new narratives. And it is also manifested. For example, in the Green Economy Coalition, we say we urgently need new narratives to imagine the impossible. So they are calling us to imagine the impossible. Also, climate change is a failure of imagination. So why don't we have some imagination? Let's be very creative, unleash our creativity. And let's imagine and illustrate how we would think the future factory, or you can say future microfactory, which I would like to call the dream place. It's a place where you have infrastructure that is common and that you can use it freely to create your prototypes, products, because we are heading towards a society where the prototype is the final product. This is at least what I believe. And not only that, that you have this dream place, but you are also surrounded by a like-minded community where you can exchange knowledge, where you can learn from each other, where you can help each other and go further. And in this case, you can create new narratives, getting inspired from science fiction literature. You know, in the 60s, they wrote so much about how they imagine the future. And this is an illustration of a picture of what we would think about now that is common, like the Oculus, no? The augmented reality. And these things were written in science fiction in the 60s. And why don't we write now about how we want to imagine our future? Have time and make space for material speculation. In this case, the student of Fabricademy Barcelona, Lara Campos, she weaved and spun yarn, embedding seeds, and then made her own loom and wove this material that is a growing fabric. And the project was called Be Grounded. So how you can immerse into the experience of a living textile. So you have, and all of this, like, embrace your ideas and embody them, live with your ideas, be your user tester, make experiments and try to see if your experiments are working for you first as part of your everyday practice. Here you see some artistic residency. We had the Recreative Europe program in the Fab Lab in 2013, where we made this garment that was dancing with the music. It was moving this fairy fair. And I think that when we want to create a common infrastructure, then we can look into the model of the Fab Lab network. Call it Fab Lab, call it Makerspace, call it Hackerspace, however you want to call it. It doesn't, the title doesn't matter so much. It's kind of creating a same tool set, language, working with GitHub so that you can commit and have a collaborative documentation so that you can merge the knowledge and expand the knowledge. Sharing software and hardware, machinery, but most of all sharing this open thinking that basically it's as if we are saying that if we had an R&D department in a company with 3 engineers, they would go X, they would develop something like at level 3. But if you have the whole world in an open source way develop something, then the evolution will be so much more agile and fast. So we are talking about a network that shares these values, which is the FabLab network. I come from FabLab Barcelona. I have been there since 2011. I studied at the Institute of Advanced Architecture at IAC Architecture, but I'm not practicing exactly architecture, or I'm doing body architecture. I don't know how you can call it. And this is an expanding network, and within the network, there are also various opportunities and types of collaboration. Lately, I'm working on a project that it has to do with empowering future female innovators for the sustainable fashion industry through skills and networks. And this is called She Makes. It's a new project that I am working on. And I think that it really puts into the practice how we can have a gender-balanced environment within an engineering and geeky environment like the Fab Labs. You know, that you have the coders, you have the engineers, and suddenly you want to embrace the fact that women can also be part of this space. And with this practice, we think also that we can have radically new approaches to products, processes, and markets by having access to tools, to a different kind of ecosystem, different disciplines. Here you can see the project of Remix El Barrio Squeeze the Orange, which is a fruit leather made out of orange peels. And this is something that is coming in the market, believe it or not, but it's something that very soon, we have also initiatives that they are smaller enterprises that they do this kind of bio-based leathers, but it's something that is new. We dedicate ourselves into the multidisciplinarity, combining digital fabrication like 3D printed fabrics and textiles, the wearable technology, embedding electronics and soft circuits on the body, biomaterials, and parametric design. And you can understand that this kind of approach is, this without sound, sorry. You can understand that this kind of approach is defining also new types of disciplines. We can see, for example, that 10 years ago, if you would say, I will become an app developer, then they wouldn't understand what you're talking about. We have new careers, new disciplines that they are emerging, and the industry itself requires new skills for the digital transformation. I can say that I cannot define myself as an architect. Maybe I am a heritage explorer or some discipline that is not invented yet. And this is by combining the different aspects and the different tools. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can you go to
it will go. I don't know where you should point it at.
No, me neither.
I don't know where the computer is.
Sorry. It was some in the process making. We said that, and it's the next slide, I think. Could you please move forward the slide? Yeah. Thank you. So we are talking about radically creating new products, such as fully 3D printed shoes made in a Fab Lab that they are wearable, they are final products, rescuing old traditions. This is a medieval technique of leather molding, and in this case, collaborating with the fashion designer through new aesthetics and digital aesthetics, rescuing and trying to bring back in the market old traditional processes, using 3D printing and additive manufacturing for jewel making. These are examples of the work that we have been developing in the lab, and using also living organisms, because we also work with biology, such as color-producing bacteria, chromobacteria, in order to dye fabrics, as we know that the chemical dyes are one of the most important reasons for the contamination of the of water from the textile industry. In this case, there is no use of water, and we use the bacterial dyes for dyeing fabrics. And also, here you can see a mushroom leather hat, and this collaboration with the designer, where, as I said before, with short-term collaboration to make different kind of products that are in the market as haute couture. And mainly, in the end, the most important is the understanding how we can transmit this knowledge, and we can contribute to the further development of these, you could say, experiments, but actually it's also what is happening in the industry at the same time. And we do this through open source guidebooks, cookbooks, tutorials, and material libraries. We have a tangible material library at the lab where you can see each of the materials. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can smell it, you can see the recipe and replicate it. You can find online different kind of recipes that you can follow, and also some kind of open source publications, short books that you can follow at home by doing this. And this is very important because the open source is something that it needs to become part of our mentality. Also, the project of Remix El Barrio shows that the importance is not in the designer, but its importance is in the collaboration, in the co-creation. It is not anymore, as our friend from Precious Plastics, David Hacken, said, I went to school, to the design school, and they told me you need to be like the designer, like Philip Stark. And this is not our future anymore. The future is to be a team, an ecosystem, and the role of designer doesn't have any importance anymore. Consider whether nature would ask who is the designer. Nature would never ask who is the designer. And this we do in distributed ways. So when we talk about the future of education, and I wouldn't say the future of education, I would say today's education, I would, and looking into the university, a university that has no border. We do this through peer-to-peer educational networks. We have set up nodes, different nodes all over the world where we do exchange of knowledge, learning by doing, and we create these hybrid careers. This is my current passion and mission, because I also work with a mission, as we heard before. And this has been done since 2017. It is now may seem as the current normal because COVID brought online education into the public, but this has been practiced in the Fab Lab network since 10 years, before teleconferencing systems existed. And in this case, we really want to work at the intersection of disciplines, where we have a set of different skills that combine, and our values are sustainability, Industry 4.0, 5.0, innovation narratives, and biotechnology. And we have this program that is incubating designers, and it is incubating designers from 18-year-old to 65, because we also think that education has no age. We think that under the new technology, the knowledge of new technology, we are all equal, so you can study something at any age. And we would like to respond to William Gibson, the science fiction writer, when he was saying that the future is here, but it's just not widely distributed yet. We would like to tell him that we would like to make sure that you know, Mr. Gibson, that we are doing the best that we can to distribute the future. And I will give the continuing of the conversation to my colleague Marion, that will talk about all of these things, but more in a systemic and overall level. Sometimes, you know, when you are creative, you cannot contextualize and understand and measure the really impact of the things. So it is very good also to collaborate and have a counterpart that can understand what is happening. No?
Thanks, Anastasia. I will be brief, just to comment some mindset also to adapt when we are thinking about this new system and the future of manufacturing. There is this model that was created some years ago now, really to think that it's important to think about the context and the local context where we are designing this now framed as multiple local circular economies. And when we are in one bubble, what you see on the second map, there is, of course, the creativity is super important, and we need to guide it that with this strong energy that we have and that can bring. But also, we need to be super vigilant, and as it was mentioned on the talk yesterday, we need also to be skeptical about what we do, what we create, and feed these critics during the design process and doing this collaboratively. So another design here, the model that we have built, it's the distributed design platform, which is also associated as partner of the NEB context. It's really important in a local context to recreate connection, interaction between citizens, between local manufacturer, between a recycling facility, and to really create this loop, and Fab Lab can really play a big role here. What is important, and we mentioned it a bit in the discussion before, is to reinvent, of course, the place that we want, where we want to fabricate. And I think with Remix El Barrio, it was really an important point when we think about this making that is happening, how we want to scale it. And I think this mentality to really keep it local and accessible, it's really important here. And we need to be vigilant really about this kind of movement and rhythm where we can go when we talk about like, big scale production. We really need to think also in that sense and make this voluntary promotion a bit of what is the role of tools and technology. It's a big question, many authors, many theory about that, but when we think about digital deal and we want to think about the future of technology, we also need to revise and look after this kind of concept that was produced in the literature, which is the conviviality approach from Illich, the low-tech approach, the appropriate technology, also mentioned by Schumacher, and of course, what Anastasia mentioned, all this philosophy of open source is quite key in that world that is sometimes facing a lot of contradiction. So I would like to finish the talk to say also, and I like really to promote this systemic design thinking, to think and to make designer people think that it's not a shame to talk about contradiction, about tension, and we really need to make projects and to take time to really talk about what's wrong also on what we are designing, to also after benefit from creative synthesis. So co-creation is about making trade-off with different things. It's about really fostering creativity. And yes, I think this is the message we wanted to tell and to discuss now with you, Lucas, and the panel. Thanks for letting us talk about this.
Thank you. It's a very interesting conclusion to take further. It's a kind of a post-research situation where you don't make a distinction what you can also see in the Starts Prize between what exactly is the artist or exactly is the designer or the engineers that you collaborate, etc. But first, unless there are very urgent questions from the audience, I want to go to our last speaker, not last but not least, Areti Markopoulou, actually your academic leader. She's a Greek architect, researcher, and urban technologies working at the intersection between architecture and digital technologies. She is the academic director of IAC in Barcelona, where she also leads the Advanced Architecture Group, a multidisciplinary research group exploring how design and science can positively impact and transform the present and future of built spaces. The way we live there and interact, and also design, I would say. Her research and practice focus on redefining the architecture of cities through the ecological and technological spectrum, combining design with biotechnologies, new materials, design fabrication, and big data. Please give her an applause.
Thank you, Lucas, for the introduction. And thank you also, Michela, Anastasia. I mean, there have been like a couple of great introductory talks for this panel, Fabrication Deep Dive. So I will try to contribute from my side as well in relation to at the architectural scale and of course the construction sector, because I want to highlight the urgency of an alternative model of architectural design and construction, since as many of you know, our construction industry is the world's largest consumer of raw materials, but also the world's largest waste generator. Our demolition and construction waste account for approximately 30% of all the waste that we generate in the EU and similar numbers in the world. And of course, as you probably observe every day in our environment, we are surrounded by concrete. Concrete actually, it's the second most widely used substance in Earth after water. And we know that it is also the most destructive material on Earth in terms of CO2 emissions, but also in terms of the natural resources that they are necessary to be extracted for its production. Now, the impact that is reflected in this data is basically a consequence driven from a linear model of make, use, and dispose. We have already heard a bit about this from the previous speakers. But if we aim to restore our current human and architectural impact in the planet, then we need to work towards circular systems in architecture and construction, systems that aim to close or at least to limit material and resource loss while having the potential to minimize waste or using it as a resource in itself. And when we are talking about this circular thinking, then nature, of course, becomes a solid base to learn from. Nature operates in the principle of abundance rather than the principle of scarcity. We keep on discussing today of what we lack, but I think that we need to change our mindset towards abundancy. Waste, for example, in nature is a concept that doesn't recognize in its function of its life cycle. It basically recognizes waste as a resource that could be used in another life cycle. So this is something that, in a way, we need to learn from. So how can we minimize then waste in architecture? How can we make a shift from a mindset of scarcity towards a mindset of abundance? I would like to very quickly discuss 3 ways to achieve that in architecture and construction. The first one is introducing circular and natural materials in architecture. The second way is to enhance alternative construction techniques, mainly on-site construction techniques. And the third one is to design for longevity and repair, to design basically for disassembly in our built environment. So for introducing circular materials in architecture, the first thing we need to do is to understand the potential of waste. I think that the Remix project, the winner of this prize, clearly states that. But also to understand how this waste could be used as a new matter in different scales, from the product design, but also to the building block and to the architectural block. We are especially working with organic waste from agriculture, and we're trying to transform them into valuable construction materials. This is a project that is we're developing, and it includes basically creating structural building composites of biochar. I'm not sure if everybody is aware that biochar is basically the byproduct of the pyrolysis of organic and agricultural waste. So in principle, we are talking about a solid material that it is mainly sequestrated carbon. No? So we sequestrate the carbon during the pyrolysis process and we transform it into matter. So building with biochar means, in a way, developing not just zero, but negative carbon emissions building solutions for architecture. And as you see in some of these images, we're working with combining design with certain manufacturing techniques, such as casting for 3D printing, for columns, beams, or load-bearing walls, with the goal of achieving buildings that are made out of CO2 instead of emitting CO2. And the most interesting part of this work is that biochar is actually an excellent soil fertilizer. So when the life cycle of these buildings, of this building composite is over, then they can be separated and we can send them back to soil to fertilize it. So why can't we imagine building bricks that they are negative carbon and they can eventually feed our soil for increasing agricultural production once their lifespan is over? And beyond upcycling materials and using waste as future matter, I think that we should not forget that there is a whole world of abundance in materials in nature, something that we seem that we have forgotten because we got stuck a bit with the concrete revolution and the steel revolution. But since many years at IAC, with the participation of a lot of different students and researchers and experts, we have been working and we have been revisiting earth constructions and technologically enhance them in order to create affordable and circular housing. Now, up to 99% of the materials used in our custom earth mix that we have created, they can be found locally. So in a way, we can use the soil below or around the constructions in order to create our matter to construct. And then the earth mix is biodegradable, it is locally found, and since it requires no firing, this mix requires no firing as traditional vernacular architecture, then this also means that once you build a prototype or a housing and its lifespan is over, then you can reuse that material to construct another one. And I think that in the current reality of displaced populations, especially this kind of ideas of what is temporal, what is, let's say, permanent, are ideas that needs to be rethought and reapplied. Now, although many connect earth architecture with developing countries, we always insist and we foresee that these earth-based constructions, they can also be present in the west part of our world, and they can radically question the contemporary concrete manufacturing, its environmental footprint, and it can even open up discussions of new aesthetics in our built environments. At our department, at the Advanced Architecture Group, we have also been working in the last decade with an obsession of combining robotic manufacturing with additive manufacturing for on-site construction. The on-site construction as a concept is a powerful one because it can contribute to reduce the ecological and monetary cost of transporting materials and equipment. And it can also offer the possibility of using, as I was saying before, locally sourced materials. On the other hand, additive manufacturing, 3D printing is a technique that it is basically requires no joints or molds in its production, and that means that it reduces waste. And you can also only deposit material where you actually need it. So the excess of material that we can find in our contemporary constructions is actually something that we can avoid. In this project that it is called Mini Builder, we have developed it some years ago. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Architecture has always been.
So in this project, we have actually tried to work together with robotic engineers and learn from swarm robotics in order to create our own tools for on-site construction, because the industry was not actually providing any. And we have been aiming to create mobile machines that can print bigger than themselves, because the problem in 3D printing is that it works fine when you are working in the small scale of product, but it works absolutely no fine if you want to produce bigger objects such as architectural ones. So instead of creating huge machines here, the idea was to create small machines that they can intelligently work together in order to produce objects that they are larger than themselves. And with the same goal of mobile machines that they can go on site, we have been collaborating with Technalia, and we have observed that they have this cable robot in their factory, and they were using it to transport heavy objects or to paint airplanes. And then we thought, hey, why can't we hack that machine in order to create one that could become a very easily assembled 3D printer on site that could cover like a big area. And this is what we did from previous work from some of our students and researchers. We created a nozzle, and then we attached that nozzle to the cable robot, and we created a huge 3D printer that we have tested in different places. Lastly, in one big exhibition of construction where we wanted to showcase in 4 days real time that we can construct a one-to-one scale big prototype. And I think that, I mean, it's another way to think about sustainable or circular design, is that it's important to realize that it's not just about using natural materials, or it's not just about using upcycle waste, but we need to use as few resources as possible in the first place. And we need to keep resources in circulation for as long as possible. And that makes design highly relevant, because design for longevity, or design for repairability in mind, or design for disassembly, they are crucial concepts so that materials can be easily dismantled and be reused when the lifespan of a building is over. And one way to approach design for disassembly is to design material systems out of scratch. The skyscraper, the wooden skyscraper that we see in the screen is representing that way. We can start out of scratch and we can design so that we can take apart then the material and the pieces. But then another way is to take advantage of the existing building stock that we can find in our built environment. So using technologies of mapping, tracing, or scanning, we can evaluate the existing materials in buildings, and this can help us create what we call material passports for buildings and material libraries for reuse in construction. So it's not like we evaluate a building anymore just with a LEED certificate, but we can also evaluate with a material passport, which showcases where the material came from, but more importantly, where they can go after. And this is a project that it is developed in our Master in Robotics and Advanced Construction program at IAC. And here students and faculty have been using drones to scan the building elements of our facilities at IAC in Barcelona and collect data on the size of the building elements, their type, and their materiality. And then in a way, we combine algorithmic design with digital fabrication in order to develop a process of reusing material and minimizing waste while maximizing efficiency in construction. And then similar techniques can also be found or take place at an urban scale. In our city and technology master program, we have used artificial intelligence techniques such as computer vision or machine learning in order to analyze huge amounts of geotagged street views and street view images and create actually building stock classification maps. So in this work, almost 18,000 of street view images of building apartments in Barcelona has been scraped with the goal to create materially libraries and detailed geolocated maps of, for instance, concrete, steel, or timber buildings. And the possibility of creating material libraries, of course, becomes fundamental for the reuse of this building stock, but the fact that we can geolocate these libraries, this adds another value to the circular design process, because materials can be chosen not only based on their appropriate typology, but for reuse, but also based on how close they are to the new construction site. And I think that this would make a huge difference when we are talking about circular design and circular economy in urban environments. So I will sum up by saying that, well, this short work actually highlights the importance of Anastasia was talking about creativity, but I think what it's also important is the combination of design with science. Design by default includes creativity, but if we also combine it with science, then we are able to push our discipline to rethink its operation. And of course, we also need to, we are coming from academies, and I think that what it is important is that we create spaces for experimentation, but we also change our pedagogical model so that we can allow the future architects or the future constructors to think in a much more holistic way. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to discuss with all the four great speakers today.
Thank you, Areti. Fantastic. Again, also like the project of Remix El Barrio, and also, however, you touched upon them much quicker, all the examples of experimentations by artists and creatives you showed, Michela. It may sound kind of naive, but I still want to ask that question. This is the START Day. START is science, technology, and the arts. One of its aims is to bring all that type of creativity and the inventions you find there to industry. But it's a question to all of you. Where are the hurdles that should be taken in order to get more industry in this context, and also more of the type of industry that we want? So not extractive industries, industries of the commons, industries that are more inclusive, industries that are not only there for shareholder value. And that may be also a very Eurocentric kind of approach if you combine that, or if you juxtaposition that towards the American industry or a Chinese type of approach. So any one of you, can you say something to that? Or shall I choose? Michela.
Okay. I didn't want to sort of hijack the stage. Well, one of the, I think, interesting things is educating industry on the idea of a rigorous artistic practitioner. So there is a misconception that artist is someone who gets struck by a bolt of lightning, for no better word. Yeah. And there is an issue with that, of course, because there is an idea that, you know, the rigor of a scientist or an engineer is, it's constructed on this idea of deduction and induction, and it's a linear process, and it sounds very, very rational. So when you look at it, you know that there's going to be, it's built on prior art, and there's going to be an outcome, etc. But there are two things that it misses completely. One is that in the context of an artistic practitioner, you have the method is actually just as rigorous if you are really good at what you do. And everybody here who's present in this discussion is a rigorous researcher. But what you do is you try and explode the views. You try and put in as many elements or as many perspectives as possible into your work so that you can actually approach it from different directions. And this is something that's missed because it's also a rigor. It's a rigorous research. So it's nothing to do with the bolt of lightning. It's got to do everything to do with very, very hard work and rigorous work. And that method is incredibly important when you're faced with the sort of paradigm of unknown unknowns, which is bandied around at the moment quite a lot, which is the idea that, with all of the new frontiers that we're facing, with not just the challenges, but also with what the technologies are throwing at us, the sort of surprises that are being thrown at us. A lot of the time, those cannot be handled with the traditional linear approach because you just simply don't have prior art on this stuff. And sometimes it happens incredibly quickly, or a huge amount of new information comes out very, very quickly. And it becomes actually an issue of being able to manage the amount of information that's coming out and being able to have the correct method to then infer the more salient parts of what is coming out of the new experimentation. So this artistic approach suddenly becomes really, really significant. And providing we can educate industry and get them to understand that this is a method, and it's a proper research method. It's a method that generates a huge amount of new knowledge in these scenarios. Then all of a sudden it becomes incredibly important for what they are facing at the moment. And so as a result of some of this being communicated to industry or industry witnessing in the labs, including, Fab Lab Barcelona, but including other labs that have been prototyping and actually pushing forward, as some of our speakers have said, basically try and compare 3 engineers in a room to a whole network, open source network creating together, and see how far you will get. As a result of witnessing this, they're actually requesting experimental labs for some of the new industrial solutions, because they want to see, first of all, they want some people who are trained to illuminate subject matter from different perspectives to help them create the solutions, and also because they actually need this kind of injection of open mentality, where huge amount of different practitioners can actually contribute to creating a solution. And they realize that the 3 engineers in the room are not going to hack it by themselves. So, there is awareness out there already. And as I say, we're working with the likes of Airbus and Siemens and Bosch, etc. So the big guys. And there are champions inside industry who actually recognize this, who are part of our community. So, I don't know, I should probably hand it over to the Fab Lab. And also thank you to Areti for a wonderful, wonderful talk, which I would love some of our colleagues in the NEB to see, actually. But I would love for the Fab Lab, for our winners rather, to actually tell us, because I'm sure that Fab Lab has members who are from industry who come in and engage. Am I right in saying that?
Areti?
Okay, sorry. I thought that was a question for Anastasia and Marion, but I can jump in.
It was, but
oh, I'm
it
sorry.
Was, right?
Then it's my mistake. Sorry,
no,
but
I was thinking, this is like a very, very important question. It's always the most important question, especially for the ones that we're working with research projects and with innovative, let's say, ideas that we're trying to implement and then to evaluate in terms of, cultural impact or economic impact. I think that when we're talking about industry, there are two key words related to that. The one is feasibility, economic feasibility, environmental feasibility, and the other one is demand, no? And I think that the way that we are operating from our disciplines could affect both of them, right? So on the one hand, feasibility is something that we can somehow, let's say, prove or test by pushing as much as possible to create pilot projects. We need to have pilot projects that fail, and we need to try again and fail again and try again, because we cannot change, especially from in the construction sector, where it's a sector that is so slow to innovation, and it does not accept anything unless something is very well proven, because regulations need to change. Then I think that the pilot projects that could showcase how certain new ideas could add value to the existing market and to the existing, let's say, production, it's fundamental. And then, of course, the European projects and the collaborations with research centers, industries, or city administrations, I think these are very important partnerships, because in a way they are all committed to produce this kind of new ideas in the form of pilot projects. And then in relation to the demand, I think that we need to be a bit more influential and try to somehow also understand that society is changing, the needs of the society is changing, and then industry responds to certain demands, no? And if we as society understand that we have a lot of power by creating collectives that we ask for different kind of processes or for different kind of products, then this would affect, you know, also the way that the usual business is happening. And I also want to say that the crisis moment in Europe was a very interesting moment, because, you know, like, it was the moment that the industries, the first thing that they eliminated in order to survive economically was their research department. And when that happened, and things started to go back because they were searching for innovation and new ideas, then there was a huge demand on collaborating with different artists, scientists, research centers, or academies. And I think that this collaboration, this kind of merge, is also very fundamental, because we cannot, let's say, believe that as solitary artists we can solve the huge challenges that we're facing. So we need to have this collaboration between individuals, between creatives, between scientists, between academies and industries. And I don't know if that answered the question, but it was...
It's a complex question, and I think we can talk a lot about it. But it's also a discussion that we are having within the Startprice Consortium. I give the word to you, because there is indeed a need of bringing industry closer, or bringing this closer to industry. So
I think that I will dare to be a little bit more radical. I think that I can assume this role for this panel, to be a little bit more radical, and say that two examples. I will give two examples. The first example is that I don't know if you know that the French law, the whole law, is on GitHub, which means that anyone in the world can read and contribute, make corrections, make suggestions to the French law, the Statute. And I think that this is a great example, because we could apply this to everything. Especially when we talk about technological innovation, new findings, and when we think that the world is a playground and it belongs to all of us, not only to us, but also to nature, and that we are all contributors to the same thing. We want to go further, and we also want to be inclusive, we want to be fair, you know, and open, no? So The second example is the example that happened, the big scandal of the COVID with the Italian team of Fab Lab makers, that they, in the need of creating ventilators for the COVID last year, they made adaptation on a design of a company, and the company sued them. So here we have an example where we see that the human brain has gone a little bit wrong because we need to save lives, and we are talking about to who belongs this design. No? And this is completely wrong value for humanity, I think. So I would say to the industry that they need to also understand and change. They also, in law-wise, licenses, copyrights, and the work Michela is amazing towards this. No, we need the passports, the digital passports. We need to trace back, and in software we can trace back because you can see the contributors. But in hardware, it's always more difficult. So this is something that could help, and that I think that it's a little bit more radical, and it needs a lot more of people that are working more into politics, policies, laws, and all of these things. But I would say that this is my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yet at the same time, I would also say there's not just one industry. It's not. I also hear Michela say something about Bosch, which is a company that is eager to learn about what is happening at IAC, what is happening in Industry Commons, and all this. I think you're perfectly right that is another frontier where we also should work towards, where there's also issues, and also related to Industry Commons, where you're mentioning ledger technologies, for instance, which in the Next Generation Internet project, which is a big project also of the European Commission, which is pushing ledger technology for societal uses, there is this discrepancy between pushing new sorts of applications and then really not knowing how to put them into the market. So I think there is a lot of ground that needs to be covered, not only from the European Commission itself or from the creatives like we have in this panel that actually do research on behalf of the European Commission. You're paid with a prize, you're awarded, and righteously so, with a prize, but also from the industry. So I think it's also seeking where you can bring parts together, and I would be very interested to make use of all the cases that are discussed here. And it certainly is also a discussion within the Starts Prize, how to look at the winning projects and bring them to the political arena and to where technology is produced that you also in part apply in the projects you do, up next to the technologies that you're inventing yourself.
And this was also to the manifesto. In the Remix El Barrio, we wrote a manifesto about policymakers.
Yeah.
If you can.
I think that's fantastic, and that's also something that we see more often. Maybe you can say something that is in the manifesto. We didn't see that so much in the presentation of all the products you are and the material experiments you're doing.
Yes, there is this manifesto is accessible online, of course. One thing we can say maybe is I can say two things, that it's sometimes involving global policy, but also just local stakeholder and local policymaker or agent. One is to promote really this transformation, this sharing of knowledge, and to engage with different workshop, activity, educational program, and to really take this as a source of of change, in fact. And after maybe more on the social entrepreneurship side, which is more concerned, I think you can see that it's about promoting the design of the cooperative, and also how we can support it from any level, no, any scale. And more globally, I would like, it's not just about the manifesto of Remix El Barrio, it's about all the work that has been done in the Ciscode project, which was really about rethinking co-creation in science, technology, and innovation. And there is many content here. There was 10 overlaps also working on different societal challenge, and they always struggle with this sustainability aspect of the project. And it's true that inside the project, we came with different solutions. First is one axis was about reinforcing the co-creation skills about the organization, but after it was also to really try to set up different partnership with the different stakeholders. And I think here the Start Prize is a good example for us. It's really like an opportunity to push forward the thinking and the project that we have developed.
Yeah. Allow me quickly also to say something again about reflow, because reflow is about creating circular material flows with waste streams in urban environments, is also looking at the business model, but the business model also needs to be supported by open source technologies, but also community support. So you also need citizens to be engaged and be activated. Yeah. IAC and FabLab Barcelona are also part of that specific project reflow that I just also wanted to mention in this context. I'm looking at the clock. We're having a long day. I think there is still a lot more to talk about, specifically about what type of industries you want to bring together here, what type you maybe also not want at this point in time where you are in an experimental stage, and also where you need to position your project maybe also more effective towards policy. So there's a lot of dynamics going on there. I think that is supported by NAP, by the STARTS initiative as a whole, but also, and they are most in detail, in all the examples, the STARTS Prize projects that were awarded, but also the projects that were shown by Michela and Areti. I want to thank you all for a set of fantastic presentations. I thought it was very inspiring. I learned a lot. I hope you as an audience did so as well. I hope so also the audience that is online. Thanks once more. In 15 minutes, we're going to have a next panel that will also interest you of the Fabric Academy, because it's about a new value chain for fashion. It has quite a lot of speakers: Karin Fleck, Silke Hofmann, Sophia Guggenberger, Eugenia Morpurgo, Filippo Nassetti, Vincenzo Reale, Malou Beemer, Anke, Sandra Nielsen, Tim van der Loo, Loreto, Binvignat Streeter, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce that well, Alexander Bello. And it's moderated by Christiane Luble-Beer. And it's looking at new technologies and processes that enable fashion production to return to places where textiles are worn. I think you also participated in the TCBL project, which was also about localizing, bringing textile production back to the local. I leave the further introduction of this panel to the moderator that will be here in 15 minutes. So stay tuned. We're going to watch Start's videos, I guess, in the meantime, in the break. I want to thank you as audience, and again, I want to thank you as speakers. Thanks. Thank you.
So Neobotanical Tailoring is a co-research project with Care Applications here in Alcoy, Spain, that was born to really rethink about what we see as traditional clothing in Western society. So the aim of the project is really to extract colors and aromas from plants from this area and apply them to textiles, and then to later on apply them to bespoke tailoring garments. So garments that are made by hand, that are made to last, and that are made for a purpose. So really keeping sustainability in mind, and working with the really great technologies here of Care Applications that use much less water than traditional dyeing processes, and to really maximize the color extractions from these plants, and then using technologies like microencapsulation to add scent to these garments and to really create a multisensorial collection. So we've been dyeing with plants like oranges, olive leaves from the area of Alcoy to really talk about the community and see how we can make an impact with local agricultures and really see how we can use the land in a different way.
Das ist ein alter Film. Hello, welcome to this next session called A New Value Chain for Fashion. This session is organized by Reframe. Reframe is one of the START's lighthouse projects. And the aim of Reframe is to rethink fashion in a research and artist collaboration. To start with, I give you a few numbers. Reframe, we organized 2 calls the last 3 years. In these 2 calls, we selected altogether 20 artists. In the first call, 10, and in the second call, 10 artists. We are 12 research partners in the project from 6 countries, and 20 scientists co-creating together with the 20 artists. And the duo of artist and researcher, they co-create for 9 months, and each artist received 55,000 euros for this co-creation process. And we work in 3 hubs, which are located in Berlin, in Valencia, and in Linz, with specializations with regards to technology. And the research partners are the Creative Region, the Verit Berlin, the ITEX, ARCA, Care Applications, EMPA, Fraunhofer, Haratec, IED Madrid, Profactor, Stratasys, and the Kunstuniversity Linz with the Department Fashion and Technology. And last year we already saw the final projects from the first call, and you could meet some artists. And today I have the big pleasure to introduce you to, in fact, 11, because we have duos working as teams. So we have 11 artists here with us, and 2 external experts for this discussion round. If we speak about sustainability and a new value chain for fashion, we have to know that in fashion we still work really traditional. So our value chain is still linear, and we can explain it with 3 words. It's make, take, and dispose. We make the garments, we sell them or take them, and after very short usage, it's thrown away. So we all know the problem of the fashion industry. We really need a change, and I think with this project Reframe, we can really contribute to this change. What is important. So in the future for the fashion industry, we really have to produce less, and the less we produce, we have to produce in a very sustainable way. And there are 2 aspects which are really important for this change. On the one hand, we have to look closer at the materials. We need more sustainable materials, but we also need new processes. We still have work with very traditional processes. So in the first half an hour, we want to focus more on the material. And in the second half, we focus more on processes. And so for this first half, I would like to introduce our panelists. So I want to start with the external expert. It's Karin Fleck from the Vienna Textile Lab. Hi.
Nice to be here.
Maybe you can introduce yourself briefly. Sorry.
My name is Karin Fleck, and I'm the founder of the Vienna Textile Lab. We use microbial colors to color textiles, and we think this is a more sustainable way to introduce biotechnology into fashion. My background is I'm a chemist, and I come more from the dark side, from the oil industry and the energy industry.
Oh, micro is not working.
I'm disconnected. It's okay. So, and so this is how I started the business. In 2017, we started the Vienna Textile Lab. And it's a startup based in Vienna, of course.
Super. Thank you. Welcome, Karin. Thanks for joining us. Then I want to start with the first Reframe artist from the second call. It's Loreto Binvignat, Streeter. I say it right, your name?
Yes, correct.
Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yes, I am a fashion designer. I have my own brand, Anima by Loreto. And I have been working with sustainable and innovative dyes for some years now. I was working at IED Barcelona, also teaching there for some years. I traveled to Vietnam. I was living there where I developed my collection, and I was working there with some Hmong women in the mountains of Vietnam, where I started doing the natural dyeing processes for my brand, and that led to doing more natural dyeing processes within Europe. And then I met Karin and started this more innovative dyeing with microorganisms also, along with her. And now in Reframe, I have been working in ITEX with the lab, and we have been producing our own bacteria to do some direct dyeing and some plant dyeing, and also Karin provided some extract to do dyeing in more of an industrial way. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
For this first round, I would like to introduce Sophia Guggenberger and Eugenia Morpurgo. They join us online. Hello, Eugenia and Sophia. Can you hear us? In fact, I don't look at you because I see you here, but I look at the camera that you see. Hello, maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sophia Guggenberger. I'm a footwear designer. I've been researching shoes in general and the process and technologies used to make them. And now it's been very much about materials also. Yes. Eugenia, do you want to?
Hi, I'm Eugenia Morpurgo. I'm a designer based in Venice, in Italy. And in the past years, I've been working, researching the relationship between material production and sustainable agriculture. And I joined Sophia for this project.
Hey, thank you. And also we have Anke in this panel, Anke Lo. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so my fashion background is in traditional collection making. I worked in the industry for a while. And then I think in 2005, I started to work on wearable technology. So that is my focus within Reframe. Thank you.
And we have Alexander Bello for the first half an hour. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex, and I'm a garment maker and tailor trained between New York and London, working with tailors and pattern cutters there. And then my focus here is on natural dyeing, which I've been developing over the past three or 4 years, and been working in Hub Valencia, developing that and introducing it into bespoke tailoring.
Okay, thank you, Alex. In fact, my first question would be for you, Karin. So if we think of materials in fashion design, so we think of a knitted or a woven textile. This was our materials for many years, decades. But today, chemistry becomes more and more important. So you are a chemist. So what is the material for you? What aspects are important for you? And why is chemistry today important for fashion design?
Yeah, it's not only chemistry, it's also material science, microbiology, and so on. But when I look at the material, I don't know still, even so with the Vienna Textile Lab, what woven means or what knitted and what types of there. I look at it like at the molecules. Is it keratin based, is it a cellulose, is it polyester, is it nylon, and this excites me. And then the second thing I'm thinking of, okay, what does the nylon, polyester, wool or silk, for instance, react with? So for instance, when it comes to colors, how can we marry them up so that they stay on each other? It's not a given, and to work on this relationship between the textile and, for instance, the color. So this is how I look at it, and I'm not very... It took us a while to understand how fashion works, yeah? And then we still ask, yeah, but what is it? And then sometimes like our counterparts don't even know what materials they send us. So there's a still ongoing discussion about this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Loreto, your project is also about bacteria dyeing. Mm-hmm. So you also work in that direction, but you are a very experienced fashion designer. So how does it come that you now look for dyeing processes and for very contemporary dyeing processes? Because in the past we were like printing, but not the bacteria dyeing. And what does this mean for your fashion, that you also take care of dyeing processes and that you look at a much broader section of design?
As I mentioned before, I've been dyeing for about, I would say, like 5 years with plant dyes. I was in Vietnam working with indigo with a Hmong friend of mine in the mountains of Vietnam, so I already had this contact. I love color. I love the application of color. I'm also an illustrator. So for me, it was like, which ways are more natural ways for your skin? No, also less polluting ways of applying color. Also, for me, it's very important to maintain these traditional techniques, right? So that they are not lost. And from that starting point, I got to working with bacteria dyes. I saw Karin giving a talk at Wear It Berlin, and I was really amazed because it was like, oh wow, this is the future of natural dyes, right? And I approached her and we presented the Worth project and we did it together. So, and for me, it's really important to kind of push this because as Karin well knows, and I think all of us are aware, the textile dye industry is incredibly polluting. It's about 20% of the waterways, right, is created by the textile dye industry. And I feel that it's unnecessary that we are polluting our planet in this way just for clothing, right? Mm-hmm. I think that we really need to restructure our priorities, right? Is it clothing or is it our lives? Is it our future, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I think it's really important to push this, right? It's really important to say, okay, we are designers, we need to be creative, right? There is a quote somewhere, it's like, if it's not sustainable, it's not design. Yes, because you have to think, the design is not just creating something, right? You're solving a problem, and yes, you want to make it aesthetic at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. But I really think that as designers, we need to embrace sustainability. And yes, maybe the dyes will not be perfect right away, but I embrace the beauty of the natural dyes. I love it. I garment dye a lot. I want my customers ideal to say, okay, I want this dyed with bacteria, or I want this dyed with cochineal, or, you know, and the garment has a life, right? It won't be perfect like your petrochemical dye, because it's coming from oil. It's also not good for your skin, the petrochemicals, right? But then if you're using natural dyes, it's better for your skin. Maybe the color won't stay on forever like it was, but okay, everything, you know, like we're not the same as we were when we were babies, right? So why do we expect our products to stay the same? You know, I really think that we need to shift our mindset, the consumer mindset of everything needs to be perfect. It's like, no, everything needs to be sustainable. That's the way that I think it applies to the designers, right? I think it's very important.
And this brings me exactly to the next question, to two online artists, Sophia and Eugenia. You go even, or you have a different approach, but you somehow go a step more forward. You even take care of the planting of your raw material. So for you, it's really important to look at the whole life of a product. So you start even much earlier. So I'm wondering, can this be done by one person doing the design? But you are a duo, so you applied together for the Reframe project. So is it important to work in teams who bring in a much broader knowledge about material? We also see it in the collaboration from Karin and Loreto in the past. So what do you say about this importance of collaboration and teamwork?
If I can take the microphone. Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, me and Sophia, it's already a collaboration. We have different background, we come together, we combine our knowledge, but what we think is that talking about sustainability, it's a very complex topic which goes all along the chain, and that needs and require the collaboration of a lot of different disciplines in order to be tackled in a more holistic way. So collaborations with different disciplines are fundamental, because once you start adjusting only one side of the chain, you're always, anyway, everything is interconnected, interrelated. So for example, in our case, as you mentioned, yes, we look at how the condition and the context in which the plants that we're using are growing, which led us to collaborate with agronomists. And if we would in the future really apply this, we would collaborate with farmers as well. And as much as we need the collaboration with people that allow us to develop materials, but then we come also as designers, kind of creating a connection between all these different kind of disciplines, and trying to have an holistic solution as much as possible in the process.
And what does it mean for the design of the product? Because you are more on the design side, Sophia. If you take care really of the whole process, like from planting to harvesting to developing the material, how does this change the design approach from you?
I think that it's something that I've done in the work before anyway, together with Eugenia and on my own, that what I do, it always depends on the resources that are actually available in a specific place. So it's the resources that are available as much as the technologies and the processes that are available. And I think what changes now in terms of looking at a specific field and designing a shoe by a field and a field by a shoe, is that what also comes into account that you have the seasons and how they change, and you're confronted with the fact that you have a certain resource at one point and a different resource maybe at another. So what we were looking at actually when we were planning the shoes is that we have four different, it's four different versions of the same model, meaning that they can be in different contexts using different materials, but always from the same field. So there is not one definite product that we make, but it takes into account that it's constantly changing, which I think is also a little bit what Loreto mentioned with the colors, the fact that what is perfect and how do you deal with colors, the fact that things transform and things change and they're constantly different. So I think that's something that very much plays into it if you think about it in this way. This idea of what is a product and what is a finished thing, and does it need to be shiny and always the same in order to communicate a product or fashion or whatever you want to call it, I think.
Mm. And Karin, they mentioned something interesting, because when they plant, they work with farmers, they collaborate with farmers. So this means a certain location becomes important. So you cannot get the material anywhere, but you do it at a certain place. So do the bacteria change from region to region? Or do you have special bacteria from a certain region?
Yeah, so basically bacteria can be found from everywhere around the world, and some of them prefer hotter regions, some colder. There's also some sort of wildlife protection on them. So there's the famous Nagoya Protocol, which sort of, if you use a bacterium from a certain country, you have to check if you have to pay something maybe. But in general, yes, also even our body, for instance, has our own little bacterial landscape called the microbiome, and that changes as well. So it's an incredible diversity that you have. And also here we had some project here from Julia Moser, who was collecting here on the campus bacteria, so it's very regional to this area. You never know what you find, but also, for instance, you could find something like a microorganism here in Austria, but it actually is very related to one of the deep sea, which is really funny that you find them. Yeah, okay. And you can, and you never know, because there is no landscape for this. Yeah. You only can figure out, okay, by the genetic code of the microbe, okay, where does it roughly belong to? Yeah.
Okay. And we have another project in the Reframe. It's not bacteria dyeing, but Alexander, you dye your fabrics with plants. You are doing plant dyeing, and in your project, you say that it's important for you to tell a story with the project. So, can the material with the plant dyeing also tell a story, or how are you seeing the material in your work?
I think Sophia and Eugenia kind of explained it quite well, that when you're talking about materials or even dyes, you're not just talking about a final color. You're really talking about ecosystems, you're talking about plants, you're talking about farmers. There's a whole world behind this kind of end results of this color. So by using plants from the region of Spain, which is what I've been kind of concentrating on, it's really telling the story of how things grow there and what certain farmers are working on, also about seasons, and it's kind of bringing all these different elements together to create a narrative. So kind of telling the story about a certain region, and I think materials and garments have the power to be able to say that, even though it's very, it's a bit hidden below the surface, is something that perhaps, can be felt. And I've also been kind of trying to integrate scent and aroma into fabrics as well, not only the color of the plants, but also their scent, to create, a different sensory experience. So it's kind of, I think there's a lot of exploration and potential within plants, kind of these hidden stories that we can use within our garments, within fabrics, And I think there's also something interesting to say about integrating it into garments that we wear on a daily basis, right? How our relationship to clothing is changing, you know, the function of a garment from just being wearable to something that maybe lifts you up a bit or makes you have some sort of subconscious that comes into play when you're wearing garments. So I think it's not just about, you know, using plants, and it's very important to respect all their properties as well and do the research, but it has this also, I guess, educational element to it where you can really learn about, you know, where they come from, and also just from people and farmers of the region as well, to make them perhaps realize things that they didn't realize in the past.
Yeah, thank you. So, Karin, what do you think? What is better, plants or bacteria?
I don't want to get.
We have the expert here. We take advantage.
I don't want to get into this, but I have to say that you know, you're right. I mean, it's beautiful to rediscover plant dyes. I mean, there is no doubt about it. And first of all, we have lost a lot since the Industrial Revolution and the introduction of synthetic dyes. Basically, the development of the natural dyes has completely depleted. And it's 150 years, not much has happening. There are a few exceptions, like there's a dye house in Vienna called Färberei Fritsch. They are specialized on plant-based dyes. But the thing is that they also deserve to be further developed. Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, there's the scalability of this. And I think what you mentioned correctly is that, okay, there's a regionality and there's a limit to upscaling, because we cannot plaster the whole planet with plants to produce colors. But I think the regionality and also to rediscover and even discover new plants or ways to color with natural means, it's something, I think it brings us in touch with our immediate environment. Yeah? And that is, I think, really, really nice. And when biotechnology comes in here, when we talk about scalability, we could take the colors that are produced here in nature and make it more feasible for larger scale. Yeah, and I think they should work hand in hand rather than compete with each other. And there's also, like, I always say in the textile lab that we don't want to compete with natural colors because the market is really small, and I think they need to exist. It's much something else, like it's more tradition, it's about regionality, but also really they deserve to sort of live on and to develop further. Because all the energy and research that has been put into synthetic dyes, like when it comes to light fastness, wash fastness, and so on, that should be also put into plant-based dyes. And I think that is really important. And there we are actually on the same page. Yeah, and there we need to develop it together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have another aspect of the material, and this is my question for Anke. So you're not working neither with bacteria, neither with plant dyeing, but you work with the interactivity or with the responsiveness. So you integrate last generation sensors into textiles to have an interactivity of the garment and the wearer. So what is material for you? Is material a material, or is it an interface, or how would you describe this?
Yeah, good question. So, so my background is in fashion. So I've worked with fashion collections for a while, for different brands, for my own brand. I worked a lot with costume design for dancers, also for a long time. So I think I always saw fabric, maybe material in general, but definitely fabric as a second skin. And it's also, I think it comes really from a personal experience. So I have very light skin, so everything shows, right? So when I blush, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm happy, you know, it just shows. I can't hide it. It's not possible. So I think it's a very close relationship I have here with material or with fabric. So I approach it as a second skin, and then together with the Fraunhofer IZM in Berlin, we worked on this embroidered touch textiles, which are responsive to touch, and the output is sound. So we decided really early, or I decided actually very early on, that the output will not be visual. There are no lights blinking, there is no visualization of anything. It's really sound. So to work with different senses. And I think this is how I see it, how can we connect, maybe over a distance also, with the help of material, and how can we stay connected, not only through this visual, sometimes I feel it's an overload, but how can we use different senses to stay connected? And I would say that combining fashion, textiles with technology, in my experience, it's really what makes these textiles last much longer. So they really become this interface where we now use the phone, we use the laptop, right, as an extension of ourselves in a way. Why not combine garments, fashion with these interfaces, so that actually textiles are still our second skin, you know, they feel good. It's embroidery, what we are using, embroidery or knitting, knitted garments. So they feel nice. I have them here, so they feel good. But they are, when I touch them, there is kind of, I can connect via Bluetooth to my friends in New York or in Spain. So that, I think, how I see the possibilities of combining these different arenas.
So we have a kind of extended material for more value, for a more appreciated product. At this point, we already passed the half an hour. I would like to also take in the other external expert and artists, but the others, please feel free also to ask a question or answer. And I also want to mention that Gisa is in the chat. If there's question you can also ask questions in the chat. So I would like to ask Anastasia Pistofidou, Starts Prize winner, to introduce yourself. You're our external expert of this round. I think you were maybe already a bit tired. You were in 3 panels already, so but I think you are a very important input for our discussion as well.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I have been following the Reframe projects with a lot of admirations, and the whole consortium and the tech providers, very, very inspiring. I would love to see a second round. I am Anastasia Pistofidou. I have co-founded the Fab Textiles Lab in 2012 at Fab Lab Barcelona. It's a research lab around textiles and materials combined with digital fabrication. It was the first textile lab within the Fab Lab, and after it has been replicated in other Fab Labs all over the world. And through the practices and the open source material that we have been generating through the years, we have decided, together with my colleague Cecilia Raspanti from WAG Society, to co-found in 2016 distributed peer-to-peer hybrid educational course that is the Fabricademy, Textile and Technology Academy, that combines, it has 4 pillars. It combines sustainability, Industry 4.0, biofabrication, and innovation narratives. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you to join our round. Next, I would like to ask Sandra Nielsen. You are a team with Tim van der Loo, so I ask you first to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm a part of the physical team here in Linz. I have a design studio together with Tim, who's on the screen. In Berlin, we are called New Kind of Blue, and we have a project, a textile project called New Blue. So we take all wasted jeans and we use the fibers that can still be repurposed. We bond them and embroider them into a new textile material. So we call it like a reincarnation of jeans, because we take a waste product and recycle it into something alike. That's kind of the DNA of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we continue with Tim, with the introduction.
Hello. Hi, my name is Tim van der Loo. I'm the second part of A New Kind of Blue. I am a material and product designer focusing on waste materials. And yeah, together since this year, Sandra and me are working together within Reframe to work on new finishings and treatments with the new blue materials.
Thank you, Tim. Then we have Malou Beemer. Hi, Malou.
Hi, good evening. So nice to see you all again. Great. Yeah, I'm Malou Beemer. I'm a Dutch designer and researcher, also one of the artists within the Reframe project this year. And I am currently working on an amazing project where we are able to look into adaptive garments, because I'm really fascinated by the fact that everything becomes smarter around us, except the most intimate thing that we can design for ourselves, and that is our clothing. So in that sense, I'm trying to explore different ways to make garments adaptive, not only for practical use, but also for aesthetic value and communication.
Thank you, Malou. And then we also have Silke Hofmann in the second round. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Silke. I'm a clothing designer and a design researcher, and my Reframe project is part of my ongoing PhD thesis that is exploring alternative clothing design processes in the spectrum of female health and breast cancer. And it explores how females who are affected by breast cancer articulate individual bra needs and how these needs can be implemented into design. In general, in my work, I'm concerned with introducing the garment wearer as a critical stakeholder into the garment design and development process.
Thank you, Silke. And then we have Vincenzo, right? I see you
Yes.
only very little. I'm not now. It's not Filippo. It's Vincenzo, right?
Yes.
Because you also work in a duo. Hi.
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Nice to see you all. So yeah, my name is Vincenzo Reale. I'm an architect and structural engineer by formation. But in the last few years, I've also worked as a designer and a computational designer. And together with Filippo, we have addressed in the past work on digital design of several products. One of the focus that we have had in the past was addressing prostheses or specific devices that generally are thought as only aids or object that needs to fulfill a function, like for example a medical function, but are not really properly designed. So our idea was to try to move from this conception of a medical object, a medical aim, as something which is just a barrier to something which is actually a design object, something that can be addressed and can be it can express also the individuality and the creativity of the wearer. So that's sort of our investigation, and we try to move with the Reframe project into garments, into the idea that we can augment a garment with, for example, 3D printing. So making the pieces that we address not only, as I was saying, an expression of an aesthetic functionality, but also fully functional by embedding some intelligence into them. So, for example, understanding how the body works, the temperature of the body works, and trying to translate that into an intelligent object that can fulfill better its purpose.
Okay, thank you to all of you. Second round. I would start the first question to you, Anastasia, Anastasia, you say not English. I'm really fascinated for your project, and I think we can learn a lot from your project. It's this engagement with the community and how you deal with waste. And in fashion, we have a lot of waste, and I think we have a big problem of our linear chain that we take, dispose, so we have a lot of waste. So how do you approach a project, and how could the fashion system or the fashion industry, how could we tackle our problem? Or do you think there are elements from your project, what you say you can give advices to the fashion industry for new ways to renew?
So I think that we are all very open-minded, and we have all understood that the disciplines need to look into other disciplines for inspiration, and promote also collaborations, multidisciplinary collaborations, and I think that this is where innovation lies. We also understand that we are in a digital transformation era where we need to invent new disciplines, and things that I think, at least in Fabricademy, we say that the new fashion designer has digital skills, 3D modeling skills, biology skills, wearable technology skills, and this is a combination. I think that this is one part for moving forward, and understand also that we are not, we shouldn't be alone. We should collaborate and seek for the correct partners to move forward. I will say, like a big cliche, it's like alone you can go fast, together we can go further. So it's a cliche, a phrase, but it makes some kind of sense. And I think also when you put the things into a real context and you can pilot and user test them, then the project has a real impact. When you document them, it can become global, and of course some values like being open source, understanding that we don't need to be only startup entrepreneurs, but also social entrepreneurs, and different kind of business models can work in such new contexts.
Yeah, I think this is very important. If you look how the fashion industry works, it's still a lot with processes we apply since 100 years or 200 years. It's still a sewing machine. So I think it now starts. But
you can definitely see this in the students, because the Fabricademy program it has participants from all over the world and with different backgrounds and all ages. The fashion students, when we explain to them that they need to document everything on the Wikipedia and that they will work together, they are shocked.
Okay.
Because they have been trained to find the fabric and not show it to anyone, because they will copy them. Anyway, this is just a small example.
Yeah, it's true. It's a part of the business, yeah. But this brings me to the next question to Sandra and Tim, because at first we think you develop a new material. But I think it's not just a material, it's much more, it's a whole process, because normally fashion designers, they do not develop their own material, but you take waste and you already start something, a process, what is important, that you engage in a community to get the waste, to do something out of the waste and to avoid the waste. So how would you say your project, it's more than a material, and what process is it about?
That's correct. Like on the surface, it's all about the material. But when you look behind, there's a lot of processes, there's a lot of hands, there are different steps. So we have like 4 different steps before we get to the end material. And first of all, we need to source our input material, and we cannot just go on Amazon or go down to a shop. We have to source waste, and where do we find that? We have to connect with the people around us, and we do that with our local environment. So there is Textilhafen, which is one of our closest stakeholders, and they take the donated clothes from citizens in Berlin. And what has been the basis for this project is to take the jeans that cannot be given to other people who need them or be sold in shops, but who are
the trousers that are destroyed and cannot be repurposed, and then take the fibers from those and give those a new life.
So in fact, you do something what is not there. I mean, we have not a waste, we throw the garments. I think only 2025 there's a rule that we cannot throw textiles away anymore. So maybe then there's something in place, but today it's not. So Anastasia, I always say in English, was this in place for you, or is this also something you started when you gathered the waste to do something new of it? It was also a system what was not in place, I imagine.
So that's I really admire your project. I have been showing it to all of my students, of course, and all of the Reframe projects. It's very interesting because when you want to become efficient, you will find one provider that can have a big amount of waste so that you can produce. It makes sense to turn on the machine. But in our case, we rely and depend on micro manufacturing, distributed manufacturing, very like sparse and little scale within a 1 by 1 kilometer area, which is like a Fab City prototype. And we had problems initially because with the organic waste, when you want to make biomaterials, biofabrics, bioleathers, fruit leathers, however you want to call them, you need to process them quite fast so that you need to dry them. We had a solar dryer on the roof terrace. Then you need to shred them, you need to trim and sift them to the granulometry you want, and then you use them as a filler for with the biopolymer to make the mix and cast them, or 3D extrude them, or mold them. So there are also different kind of digital fabrication manufacturing processes, or heat press them. And we developed the machinery for that. So we developed the small-scale DIY machines for doing all of these to make a little micro-factory, and probably it can be also, when it's documented, replicated in other places of the world. The difference between working with organic waste is that and fabrics is that when you need to recycle the fabrics, you need to separate the different components, which is a tedious work that cannot be automized by artificial intelligence or robots, which is taking out the buttons, zippers, and disassembling this is kind of some kind of problematic.
Yeah, so I think you challenge, you have a big challenge. Maybe let's have also a look, because the time, we have only 1 hour, but we have so great projects here, so I really want to give everybody a little bit of... let's have a look at other processes, let's say, and I look at Malou and Vincenzo. I'll see you here. You are interested in the relation somehow of, like Vincenzo, Filippo, you say that the wearable object and the relation to the body, and for Malou, you are also interested in this relation. But what I think is interesting, Malou, that you are also interested to work closer with the industry, where Filippo and Vincenzo, you are more in a speculative way. So maybe I ask first Malou, so in your process, because in the first, we always think, oh yeah, it's a smart textile, this is not sustainable. But on the other hand, like if you have an approach to have a better connection and a more valuable product, so this also, it's a good product. So where do you position yourself in your project? What does it add to a more sustainable process, your project?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think this is a super important point, because often when we talk about sustainability, we mainly zoom into the manufacturing and the producing of the materials themselves, which is of course extremely important. But that is only one part of the value chain. And I think it is really essential to also look throughout the other elements in the value chain. So therefore, for me, it is way more interesting to address the elephant in the room. And that is how we actually treat our garments.
So I think in that sense, there is a lot of potential, because back in the day, it were these super valuable items that you actually would give to your children, and it would continue on, and it would have a way longer lifespan. And I truly think that we can't go back to that, but we can add new properties and abilities to our garments to enhance the values that we feel towards them, strengthen that relation, and with that, hopefully, eventually, make the lifespan longer and make our interest also longer in the garments itself. I mean, how amazing would it be if I would be able now to change my shirt from blue to red when I'm speaking, so I'm standing out more, and when I'm listening to the other conversations, I can put myself in the background again. Why is this still not happening? And it is possible. So within that, I think it is essential to look into that element, but also, like we heard before, that it is hard to take the garments apart. That is a huge design error. I think it is essential that we as designers also take responsibility, that we design in a modular way. So it is also easier to take it apart eventually at the end of lifespan, especially if you integrate electronics into garments. It is essential to look at how can we use a modular design approach that can actually trigger new dynamics between the garment and the wearer, but also between the supplier and the wearer. But also, how can we take it apart eventually after the use?
Yeah, I think that's very important what you say. And I think it's so interesting with Vincenzo, because I talked with Filippo, and we had a very interesting conversation, and it was a bit about this speculation and other design methods, because also fashion, it's a very fast business. It's always, we do not really have the time or take the time for speculation or look more far, and what could we learn, because you are both architects, so what could we learn from methods from architecture or from other methods, and what could this bring back to the fashion system, or to get new processes to look more far in the future?
I mean, I think one thing coming from an architecture background and practice, and it's something that came up also from the conversation previously, is that when you think of a building, you think at a very complex project, very complex object with a lot of different layers, and this is also why it's really difficult to approach, because there are many people involved. It's a process that requires a lot of expertise to be completed. And normally, when you think to a cloth, to a garment, you have an idea this is something which is more streamlined, more easy to assemble, and that involves less people. And I mean, maybe in the old times, just one person could do all the process. I mean, this has changed, of course, but I mean, in the mind and the perspective of the people, is still compared to a building, something which has a different amount of complexity, and maybe less people involved into the process. I think it is important that more and more we get into the fashion industry, more layer of people, more layer of experts, and there is a cross-contamination between these different inputs, because, I mean, also, if you want to have a successful building, you need to have a network of people behind that have different expertise. They make it possible, and you need to have knowledge of materials, of structure, of performances. And so I see that this idea that fashion can become a product which is as complex as a building is something which is potentially very interesting. And I mean, similarly, and this, from this perspective, I see that the fashion industry is quite similar from the building industry, from the perspective that digitalization and the digital revolution has arrived to those fields a little bit. Apologies, I was saying that the digitalization arrived a little bit later than other fields, like, for example, automotive or product design, but slowly it made into the industry, and that has been a big change in the last few years. And it's not just about the being faster and quicker, but it's about optimization. It's about being able to use less resources, to have buildings which perform better and that are more comfortable for the users. And I see a parallel there with fashion, because, I mean, again, it's not a a field where you would think that something digital comes into it by nature, but slowly digitalization, the inclusion of electronics into garments is something that is coming into that, and it's improving the product and potentially can lead, as I said, not only to improve the performances, but the improvement of the sector as a whole. So the ability to being able to use less resources to optimize the garment to make them last longer, for example. So I see both parallel and I mean, maybe idea that can come from one and contaminate from one field to another.
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting and somehow related. So we need to produce less, and the things we produce, we need a better connection, be more attached to the garments, and be open to other disciplines and not hide our fabrics under the table that no other students is seeing it, as Anastasia, you said, mentioned the students. And I think we also have one very good examples in the reframe, among the reframe artists. So Silke, you are for me the true co-creator in the second call. So in your project, I was really amazed that you orchestrated a whole team, a big team to arrive at your prototype for the bras for the breast cancer patients. And but you're also a fashion designer with quite an experience as a fashion designer. So you know the traditional process, and now you experienced really this true co-creation process with the whole team and with the user. And so what was your experience, and how could the fashion system invent or work better? What is your experience from this co-creation?
Yeah, hi. I was listening to Vincenzo very, very carefully, and I would like to interject here and say that I would argue that a garment is just as complex and has always been as a house, and I would say that in olden times, a house could also be built, and in many places of the world is still built by one person with two hands. So I think this is a very interesting point that you made, Vincenzo, and it's also answering your question maybe a little bit, Christiana, is that actually fashion is a process that has so many different people and institutions involved, and the garment making is highly complex or can be very simple. But in our current system, we are working with many people, and to your question, Christiana, I would say that the fashion design process is always a co-creation process, because wherever people are involved, people are interacting with each other, and the human connection is there. And one of the problems is that we are ignoring it. So we are ignoring a huge part of who we are, how we respond to one another on many different levels, and problems arise out of this ignorance, so to say. And so this co-creation process that I underwent while doing reframe and also in my PhD studies is, I'm just kind of shedding a light on it and documenting every single thing. So I documented the whole entire process, how we interacted with each other also on a human level, and how we just, as an ethnographic study, so to say. So it wasn't very different from other processes, just that we were very aware of it. And the findings I'll present at the end of September, I think it's there's not a solution that I can offer at the moment. I think it's just we have to be very aware of how we interact with each other, and to include everybody in the process and every piece of the puzzle in the process, including materials and other entities as well.
And here you bring something very interesting in the discussion, because I think it's interesting that you say that the processes are not so different, but is it a time factor? Is it more something like slow down and take time for the discussion? Is this maybe the change or the different way that you took the time to speak with the person who will wear the garment, and that you maybe take time to research where the yarns come from?
maybe I'm the wrong person to ask, because that was always my interest. Obviously, in industry, you cannot, depending on where you work, you maybe are not able to be as source the products and the materials you use from the places you would like to source them from. So if you're working for somebody, you have to oblige by their rules. But in terms of working with people and trying to make the social responsibility process, or the process amongst workers and everybody in the chain that you can reach, a process that is a communal process, that was always my goal. And I felt that the best products really do stem from these kind of collaborative approaches, or at least where humans are open and transparent with each other, and all feel that they're in one team. You can achieve more. I like the quote, you can achieve much more if everybody is having the same mission and entering the process with this. So yes, of course, I mean, that is very known. Time is of the essence. Fashion industry is going way too fast. We have to slow down everything. But I think that's not new news, is it?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is really interesting, what we learned with regards to processes. It's that maybe it's not that different, but maybe to be much more attentive and put the right aspects in the middle, and also look at what is the future resources, and maybe engage much more with the community to see where it comes from, and to look for tools how we could invent systems that we can finally work with that, but also to give more value to the garment and arrive this with interactivity. So I'm afraid we have to close this session. It's already, we are over the time, but I think each topic we could have another session. It was very interesting. I thank you very much to all. I look here now to the screen. Thank you very much for the online participants, and thank you very much for the round. And I thank a lot to the START initiative and the European Commission to finance this project. I hope it got an impression how glad we are with our projects and the achievements. And I hand over to Mr. Evans. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for another great panel. And I agree with you that it only has limited time. You start a lot of conversations, but I think there's a lot of bars that we can seek in Linz to have much longer of these conversations. I think these are even more important, because what you start here needs to develop further. So I want to thank this other Reframe panel, again with the Stars Prize winner, part of that, for a very interesting discussion. We touched a lot today. It was a long day. You may not have tuned in for every session, but I was here from 10 this morning until now, not moderating all panels. There were great other moderators. There were great issues at the table, all around the two Stars Prize winning projects of the Territorial Agency and Remix Albario. I want to thank all the speakers today for bringing up all these interesting visions, ideas about how we use data to observe ecological change, how we need to be critical of that, and how we use materials to push back the ecological footprint of humanity, to make two big labels to the morning and the afternoon session. I think it was fantastic that this was supported by the European Commission, that is supporting the Stars Prize, which is executed by three partners, that is Beaux-Arts in Brussels, Ars Electronica, where we are now, and the festival is actually just starting. This is the end of the first day. And WAG, we are the third partner in the Stars Prize. So I want to thank, again, all the speakers and the audience for watching. I think there's one last thing I have to say. At 7 o'clock, that's almost now, you can go online where you can meet a number of the Stars Prize artists. Go there, talk to them. It's a very interesting occasion, and it's very inspiring people. Once more, thank you. Have a good night and enjoy the other days here at Ars Electronica, and go see the Starts Prize projects. Thank you.